The great hall of the Cathar Imperium resonated with a silence so profound it was a physical weight. On the obsidian dais, suspended in the chamber's heart by gravitic emitters that shimmered like heat haze, sat the triumvirate. Their armored carapaces, etched with the lineage of conquest spanning millennia, absorbed the stark, cold light that filtered down from the vaulted ceiling, a cosmos of captured starlight held in crystalline lattices. Below them, arranged in descending tiers of polished stone, the delegates of the allied dominions shifted uncomfortably, their varied forms a testament to the Imperium's vast reach and ironclad control. There were the insectoid Zithra, their multifaceted eyes unblinking, the gelatinous ore, whose thoughts manifested as swirling colors within their translucent bodies, and the stoic, silicon-based silicates of Jotunheim, whose voices were the grinding of stones. For cycles they had debated, their voices rising and falling like a discordant symphony of fear and pride. But now, a shared disquiet had finally choked all argument into stillness. The source of their consternation was not a rival empire or a burgeoning rebellion, but a single, insignificant vessel. It had appeared without warning at the edge of the Chasm of Echoes, a treacherous nebula that served as a natural border to their dominion. It was a ship of middling size, graceless in its design, a brutalist shard of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It broadcasted no transponder codes, hailed no one, and responded to no inquiries. It simply sat there, a silent, stubborn mote of dust in the grand, celestial tapestry of the Imperium. Scanners, both passive and aggressive, yielded nothing of substance. Its energy signature was laughably faint, barely above the background radiation of the nebula itself. Its material composition was a perplexing blend of common alloys and unidentifiable inert compounds. It was a ghost, a phantom, a thing that should not be. The Praetorian fleets, guardians of the Imperium's borders, had at first dismissed it as a derelict, a forgotten relic from some long-dead primitive race. They had logged its position and moved on, their attention fixed on the grander theater of galactic politics. It was a ship to be ignored. But the ship did not drift. It maintained its position with a precision that belied its apparent simplicity. For cycles, it held its station, a silent observer at the edge of their sovereign space. The initial dismissal had curdled into irritation, then suspicion, and now a deep, gnawing anxiety that no one dared to voice aloud. The Lord Admiral of the Outer Rim, a veteran Cathar whose battle scars were a map of the Imperium's bloody history, had finally dispatched a squadron of interceptors to force a response. The interceptors' sleek, predatory craft that moved like silver darts had approached the vessel with their weapons charged, their comms channels open, demanding identification and intent. The silent ship had responded, but not with words. It had shifted. Not its position in space, but its very presence on their sensors. For a brief, terrifying moment, the interceptors' advanced detection systems had registered the ship as being simultaneously in multiple locations around them, a quantum ghost that defied the known laws of physics. The pilots, their battle-hardened minds reeling from the impossibility of their readings, had fallen back in disarray, their reports seeding the first real tendrils of fear throughout the high command. Now that fear had blossomed in the heart of the Imperium. Before the triumvirate, the debate raged anew, though its fire was dampened by a cold dread. "It is a scout," hissed the Zithra delegate, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "A precursor to an invasion. Its silence is a tactic, a means of sowing discord and uncertainty before the true fleet arrives. We must strike now decisively before they can gather their strength." The Ore delegate pulsed a calming, deep blue, but the edges of its form shimmered with a nervous violet. Its thoughts flowed into the chamber's translation matrix, a soft, melodic voice that belied the gravity of its message. "To strike without understanding is the path of fools. We have no knowledge of this race, their capabilities, or their intentions. What if this is a test, a demonstration of power so subtle we have failed to grasp its meaning? To respond with aggression would be to reveal our own primitive nature." The silicate representative from Jotunheim remained impassive, its rocky form unmoving, but its voice, when it finally spoke, rumbled with ancient wisdom. "The unknown is a mirror. In it we see our own fears reflected. You fear invasion, Zithra, because your people have a history of conquest. You counsel caution, or because your race has always valued knowledge above all else. But we do not know what this entity values. We see a ship, but perhaps it is something else entirely. A monument, a tomb, a message in a form we cannot comprehend." High Lord Vorlag, the eldest of the Cathar triumvirate, raised a clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent once more. His voice was a low, powerful rasp, honed by centuries of command. "Your words have merit," he began, his gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. "But they are born of speculation, not fact. And the facts are these: an unknown vessel of unknown origin and unknown capability has breached our borders and defied our authority. It has demonstrated a technological capacity that, while limited in its display, suggests a mastery of principles that are, to us, theoretical at best. Whether it is a scout, a test, or a message is irrelevant. It is a challenge. The Imperium has not endured for 10,000 cycles by tolerating challenges to its sovereignty." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon the assembly. "The Grand Armada is mustering at the edge of the chasm. It will be the largest concentration of naval power this galaxy has seen since the Great Heresy. We will approach this anomaly not with a squadron of interceptors, but with the full might of the Cathar Imperium. We will demand its surrender. If it refuses, we will annihilate it. If it is a scout, its masters will receive a message of our power. If it is a test, we will show them that we are not to be tested. And if it is a tomb, then its occupants are about to receive a great deal of company." A grim murmur of assent rippled through the hall. The Zithra clicked their mandibles in satisfaction. Even the oar's colors settled into a reluctant, somber gray. The decision was made. The die was cast. In their arrogance, born of millennia of unchallenged dominance, they saw no other path. They could not conceive of a reality where their overwhelming power would be insufficient. They were the apex predators of this galactic arm, and this silent, insignificant ship was about to learn the folly of trespass. The Grand Armada was a sight to stir the soul and chill the blood. It was a city of steel and fire, a mobile continent of warships that blotted out the stars. Dreadnoughts, kilometers long, their spines bristling with energy cannons and missile batteries, formed the core of the fleet. Around them swarmed cruisers, destroyers, and frigates, a dizzying array of vessels designed for every conceivable aspect of naval warfare. The light from a nearby star glinted off their armored hulls, creating a dazzling, deadly spectacle. At its head was the will of the Imperium, the personal flagship of Lord Admiral Kalen, a vessel that had shattered worlds and brought entire civilizations to their knees. Kalen stood on the bridge of his flagship, a towering figure of scarred carapace and unwavering resolve. Before him, the main viewscreen showed the chasm of echoes, a roiling, chaotic expanse of gas and dust, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the cold, hard reality of the fleet he commanded. And there, at its edge, was the ship everyone had ignored. It looked even smaller now, more insignificant against the backdrop of his assembled might. A single dark speck against the fury of the nebula and the overwhelming power of his armada. A flicker of contempt, a rare indulgence for the disciplined Lord Admiral, crossed his mind. What could this one ship possibly hope to accomplish? What was its purpose? Was it the height of arrogance or the depth of foolishness that led it to this place, to this confrontation? His communications officer turned to him, his voice crisp and formal. "Lord Admiral, we are in range. All channels are open, broadcasting the Imperium's ultimatum on all frequencies." Kalen nodded, his eyes never leaving the viewscreen. The ultimatum was simple and brutal: surrender and be boarded or be destroyed. There would be no negotiation, no discussion. The time for that had passed. The Imperium did not parley with trespassers. They waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity, the only sound on the bridge the low thrum of the ship's engines and the soft chime of consoles monitoring the silent vessel. The ship did not respond. It did not move. It did not power up its weapons. It did not raise its shields. It simply sat there, a silent rebuke to their power, an infuriating, inexplicable puzzle. Kalen's patience, a resource as vast and deep as the space between worlds, began to fray. "They mock us," he growled, his voice a low threat. "They sit in our space, defy our commands, and offer us only silence." He turned to his tactical officer. "Target the vessel, a warning shot. Fire a single plasma torpedo. Aim to disable, not destroy. Let us see if a taste of our fire can loosen their tongues." The officer's claws flew across his console, and a moment later, a brilliant spear of incandescent energy erupted from the will of the Imperium, streaking across the void toward the silent ship. The assembled crews of the Grand Armada watched. Their collective breath held. The torpedo, a weapon that could cripple a cruiser, closed the distance in seconds. And then the impossible happened. The human ship did not raise shields, it did not deploy countermeasures, it did not attempt to evade. The space around it simply warped. The torpedo, which had been on a perfect intercept course, suddenly veered away as if deflected by an unseen hand. Its trajectory bent into a graceful, harmless arc that carried it deep into the chasm of echoes, where it detonated in a silent, brilliant flash of light. A collective gasp. A sound of thousands of beings expressing their disbelief at once echoed across the fleet's internal comms. On the bridge of the will of the Imperium, a stunned silence fell. Kalen stared at the view screen, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. It was not a shield. Shields registered on their sensors, flaring with energy as they absorbed or deflected a blow. This was nothing. The ship had not projected a field. It had, it seemed, simply told space itself to move aside. "Report," Kalen snapped, his voice tight. The tactical officer's claws trembled slightly as he raced to analyze the data. "Lord Admiral, there was no energy reading. No shield, no tractor beam, no gravitic distortion that we can identify. The space around the vessel simply curved. The torpedo followed the new geodesic. It was not deflected. Its path was redefined." Kalen's mind reeled. The theoretical physics of spacetime manipulation were known to the Imperium's most brilliant minds, but they were just that, theory. The energy requirements, the computational complexity, were believed to be insurmountable, the domain of gods, not mortals. To witness it used so casually, so effortlessly, to swat aside a plasma torpedo like an annoying insect, a cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of his stomach. The contempt he had felt was gone, replaced by a dawning, terrifying respect. He had made a grave error. They had all made a grave error. This was not a primitive derelict. This was not a foolish scout. This was something else entirely, something ancient, something powerful, something that had been observing them, judging them from the silent darkness. And then, for the first time since its arrival, the human ship spoke. Not with a broadcast on their comms channels, but with a simple, elegant message that appeared on the main view screen of every ship in the Armada, translated instantly and perfectly into the Cathar's harsh, angular script. The message consisted of only 3 words. 3 words that would shatter the foundations of their 10,000-year-old empire. 3 words that announced the arrival of a new and terrifyingly calm power in the galaxy. The words were, "That was unnecessary." The message hung in the void, stark and absolute, a monument to their own folly. For a long moment, no one on the bridge of the will of the Imperium moved or spoke. Lord Admiral Kalen stared at the words, the Cathar script so perfect it could have been inscribed by a master calligrapher. The calmness of the statement was more chilling than any threat. It was the detached, almost paternalistic rebuke of a superior being to a child who had misbehaved. It implied a power so vast, so confident that the combined might of his grand armada was not a threat but a nuisance. "They speak," the communications officer whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and awe. Kalen found his voice, the words feeling like shards of glass in his throat. "Open a channel, a direct visual link. Now." He would see these beings. He would look into the eyes of those who could bend the fabric of reality and speak with such unnerving tranquility. The channel opened. The main view screen flickered, the image of the small, dark ship replaced by an interior view. It was not the bridge of a warship. There were no armored bulkheads, no flashing warning lights, no crew scurrying about in a panic. It was a space of serene, minimalist design. The walls were a soft, matte white, and the lighting was diffuse and gentle like a cloudy day on a pleasant world. In the center of the room stood a single figure. It was bipedal, slender, and shockingly unarmored. Its skin was pale, its hair dark, and its eyes, a deep, contemplative brown, held a look of profound, almost weary patience. It wore a simple, dark blue garment that seemed more suited to a scholar than a warrior. It was a human. Kalen had seen depictions of humans before in the dusty, forgotten archives of the Imperium's xenobiology division. They were a young race, from a minor world in an uninteresting spiral arm, noted only for their chaotic social structures and their puzzlingly rapid, if primitive, technological advancement. They were considered a curiosity, a species of no galactic importance, certainly no threat to the established powers. The archives had been wrong, horribly, catastrophically wrong. The human on the screen inclined its head slightly, a gesture that the translation matrix helpfully labeled as a sign of polite acknowledgement. "I am Captain Eva Rostova of the United Nations vessel Copernicus," the human said. Her voice was calm, melodic, utterly devoid of fear or aggression. It was the voice of someone in complete control of the situation. Kalen drew himself up to his full, imposing height, the plates of his ceremonial armor clicking together. He was the Lord Admiral of the Grand Armada, the fist of the Imperium. He would not be intimidated. "I am Lord Admiral Kalen of the Cathar Imperium. Your vessel has violated our sovereign space. You have ignored our warnings and defied our authority. By all the laws of the established galactic order, we have the right to destroy you." The human, Captain Rostova, listened patiently, her expression unchanging. When he had finished, she offered a small, sad smile. Lord Admiral, she said, her voice still impossibly serene, you are operating under a number of misconceptions. We have not violated your space. We have been waiting at a previously agreed-upon demarcation point, a point established by a treaty your people seem to have forgotten. A treaty signed by your ancestors and ours, long before the Cathar Imperium had reached its current prominence. Kalen's mandibles flared in shock and disbelief. A treaty with your primitive race? That is impossible. We have no record of any such agreement. Captain Rostova's smile did not falter. You wouldn't. Your great heresy, as you call it, was more than just a civil war. It was a cleansing, a deliberate erasure of your own history. You destroyed your archives, your data cores, everything that contradicted the new doctrine of imperial supremacy. You cut yourselves off from the galactic community, believing yourselves to be the sole inheritors of this arm of the galaxy. You have forgotten so much. She gestured to a space beside her, and a holographic display shimmered into existence. It showed a star chart, but one that was ancient, depicting the galaxy as it was millennia ago. And it showed the treaty, written in the high script of the Cathar Old Kingdom, alongside the flowing, elegant script of humanity. The seals of both their peoples were affixed to the bottom, glowing with a faint, residual energy. It was authentic, unmistakably, terrifyingly authentic. We have been waiting, Captain Rostova continued, her voice softening with a hint of something that sounded like pity. We have been observing. We honored the treaty even when you had forgotten it. We watched as your empire grew, as you conquered, as you enforced your will upon others. We hoped that in time you would mature, that you would remember the wisdom of your ancestors, who understood that the galaxy is a place of infinite diversity, not a monolith to be ruled by a single will. We hoped we would not have to intervene. Kalen felt the foundations of his world, of his entire belief system, cracking beneath him. The heresy was the bedrock of their history, the moment the Cathar had thrown off the shackles of a weak, decadent past and embraced their destiny as rulers. To be told that it was a self-inflicted wound, an act of cultural vandalism that had blinded them to the true nature of the galaxy. It was a blow more powerful than any weapon. Intervene, he managed to choke out, the word tasting like ash. You, a single unarmed ship, you think you can intervene against the Grand Armada? For the first time, a flicker of something other than calm crossed Captain Rostova's face. It was not fear or anger. It was a profound, deep-seated sorrow. Lord Admiral, she said, and her voice was heavy with the weight of her next words. You mistake a lack of weapons for a lack of power. My ship carries no armaments. It has no torpedoes, no energy cannons, no shields. It has no need of them. The Copernicus is not a warship. It is a research vessel, a library, a keeper of history. But it is also a demonstration. She made another small gesture, and the view on the screen behind her changed. It now showed a real-time tactical display of the Cathar Armada, rendered in stunning, perfect detail. Every ship, every squadron was marked and tracked. But there was something else. A faint, almost imperceptible web of something was overlaid on the display, connecting every ship in the fleet. Your armada is a magnificent achievement of engineering, Lord Admiral, Captain Rostova said, her voice a soft, academic murmur. But it has a weakness, a flaw that you have never perceived because you have never faced an opponent who could exploit it. Your ships, your command and control systems, your very technology, it all operates on a fundamental set of physical principles. Principles that, we have discovered, are only a small subset of a much larger, more complex reality. As she spoke, the web on the display began to glow, a soft, ethereal blue. We are not manipulating space-it. Lord Admiral, not in the way your theorists imagine. We are simply editing it. We are making small, precise adjustments to the fundamental constants of the universe within a localized area. The gravitational constant, the speed of light, the Planck length. To you, these are immutable laws. To us, they are variables. A cold, terrifying understanding began to dawn on Kalen. He watched, horrified, as on the tactical display the blue web flared brightly. What are you doing? He demanded, his voice cracking with a fear he had not felt since he was a frightened hatchling. Captain Rostova's expression was one of genuine regret. A demonstration, Lord Admiral. I am so sorry you have forced us to this. We are not your enemies, but we cannot allow you to continue on this path of self-imposed ignorance and aggression. It is a danger not only to yourselves, but to the delicate balance of this galactic region. She looked directly at him, her brown eyes filled with a sorrow that seemed as ancient as the stars themselves. Watch, she said softly, and understand. On the main view screen, and on the bridges of every ship in the Grand Armada, the universe went mad. The stars, which had been fixed points of light, began to smear and distort. The vibrant colors of the chasm of echoes bled into one another, swirling into a chaotic, nauseating vortex. Alarms shrieked across 1,000 bridges as navigational systems failed, unable to comprehend a reality where the very fabric of space was being rewritten. And then, the ships themselves began to come apart. Not in fire and explosions, as in a conventional battle, but in a quiet, surreal, and utterly horrifying deconstruction. Hull plates forged from the strongest alloys known to the Imperium simply ceased to be contiguous. They unraveled, their molecular bonds dissolving as the physical laws that held them together were gently, precisely, and irrevocably altered. A dreadnought, the pride of the fleet, a vessel that had taken a century to build simply drifted apart, its components separating and floating away from each other as if in a slow-motion ballet of destruction. There were no explosions, no casualties, no screams of the dying. The life support systems remained intact, the crews trapped in their suddenly isolated compartments, watching in stunned, silent horror as their invincible armada was dismantled around them, piece by piece, by an enemy that had not fired a single shot. It was not a battle, it was a lesson, it was a dissection. The will of the Imperium, Kaelin's own flagship, was spared this fate, left untouched amidst the floating, silent debris of his ruined fleet. He stood on his bridge, a statue carved from despair, watching as the symbols of his people's power were reduced to a ghost fleet of inert, harmless components. The Grand Armada had not been defeated. It had been edited out of existence. The message was clear: we can unmake you. We can erase you from reality as easily as a scholar striking a line from a forgotten text. The human ship, the Copernicus, remained where it had always been, silent, dark, and now, imbued with a power so absolute it defied comprehension. The ship everyone had ignored had not just ruined an armada. It had shattered a world view. It had broken an empire's pride, its spirit, and its understanding of its place in the universe. The silence that followed the armada's dissolution was more profound than any roar of battle. Aboard the will of the Imperium, Lord Admiral Kaelin stood amidst the frozen tableau of his bridge crew, their faces a mixture of terror and catatonic disbelief. The ship floated in a graveyard of its own making, surrounded by the silent, drifting components of what was once the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. They were not destroyed, merely disassembled. The human ship, the Copernicus, had not killed them. It had simply taken their toys away. The comm channel with Captain Rostova remained open, her calm, sorrowful face still looking out from the main view screen. She had not gloated. She had not issued new demands. She was simply waiting for him to comprehend the utter, soul-crushing totality of his defeat. Kaelin finally found the strength to move. He walked, his armored footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence of the bridge until he stood directly before the view screen. He looked into the human's eyes, and for the first time he did not see an enemy. He saw a teacher. A stern, patient, and infinitely powerful teacher who had just delivered the harshest, most necessary lesson of his life. "Why?" he asked, the single word a croak, a plea for understanding from a mind stretched to its breaking point. "Why this demonstration? Why not simply destroy us? Why not conquer us as we would have done to you?" Captain Rostova's expression softened further. "Because we are not you, Lord Admiral," she said gently. "We are not conquerors. The destruction of life, any life, is anathema to us. We do not seek to rule, we seek to understand. We are explorers, scientists, historians, and we are guardians." She paused, letting the word hang in the air between them. "Long ago our species was much like yours, arrogant, aggressive, convinced of its own superiority. We nearly destroyed ourselves and our world in a series of foolish, prideful conflicts. We learned the hard way that true strength is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to build, the courage to admit when you are wrong, the grace to show mercy." She gestured again, and the star chart from the ancient treaty reappeared beside her. "This treaty was not just a demarcation of borders, Lord Admiral. It was part of a larger network, a galactic compact of older, wiser races who had seen the rise and fall of countless empires like your own. They understood the cycles of galactic life, the dangerous adolescence that all young, spacefaring species must endure. They established a set of guidelines, a framework to protect the galaxy from the destructive impulses of its younger members, and to protect those younger members from themselves. When the Cathar Old Kingdom signed this treaty, they pledged to become part of that community. When you embraced the heresy, you turned your back on it." Kaelin listened, the history of his people being rewritten before his very eyes. The decadent ancestors his culture reviled were not weak, they were wise. They had sought to join a community of equals, while his own generation had sought only to create a pyramid of subjects with the Cathar at its apex. "These older races," Kaelin said, his voice barely a whisper. "Where are they now?" Profound sadness entered Captain Rostova's eyes, a shadow that seemed to dim the light in the room behind her. Gone, she said softly. Most of them, at least. They moved on, ascended to a different plane of existence, or simply voyaged into the dark spaces between the galaxies, seeking answers to questions we are not yet ready to ask. They left behind their knowledge, their history, and their charge to the races that would come after them. A charge that humanity accepted. We are the inheritors of their watch. We are the librarians of their great library. The Copernicus is not just a ship, Lord Admiral. It is a key. A repository of the combined knowledge of 1,000 civilizations that rose and fell before yours was even born. The sheer, staggering scale of this revelation washed over Kalen. He and his people were not the masters of the galaxy. They were children, playing with sharp sticks in the shadow of giants, utterly oblivious to the vast, complex history that surrounded them. Their 10,000-year empire was but a fleeting moment, a footnote in a galactic history so ancient and grand it was beyond his comprehension. So, what now? Kalen asked, the question not one of a defeated admiral to his victor, but of a lost child to a knowing adult. You have shown us our insignificance. You have disarmed us. What is your purpose now? Our purpose is the same as it has always been, Captain Rostova replied. To observe, to learn, and to help others when they are ready to be helped. You, Lord Admiral, and your people are at a crossroads. You can cling to the shattered remnants of your pride, you can hate us for the lesson we have taught you, and you can wither in your self-imposed isolation. Or, you can choose a different path. You can rejoin the galactic community. You can open your minds, your archives, your hearts to the truth of your own history, and to the vast, wondrous universe that you have, until now, only seen through the narrow lens of conquest. The choice is yours. We will not force it upon you, but we will be here to help if you ask. Kalen was silent for a long time, the weight of ages pressing down upon him. He thought of the triumvirate of their arrogance and their certainty. He thought of his people, raised on a doctrine of supremacy that had now been proven to be a childish fantasy. The path ahead would be difficult, chaotic, perhaps even violent. To admit such a fundamental error would shatter the foundations of their society. But the alternative, to continue in ignorance, to live a lie in a universe so much larger and more complex than they had ever imagined, was unthinkable. He looked at the calm, patient face of the human captain, and he saw not a conqueror but a guide. "We have much to discuss," he said, the words a surrender, an admission, and a plea all at once. Captain Rostova nodded, a small, genuine smile finally gracing her lips. "Yes, Lord Admiral," she said, "we do." In the cycles that followed, the Cathar Imperium was thrown into turmoil. Lord Admiral Kalen's report, accompanied by the irrefutable evidence of the Grand Armada's nonviolent incapacitation and the historical data provided by the Copernicus, sent shockwaves from the core worlds to the furthest colonies. The triumvirate was deposed, not in a bloody coup, but by a tidal wave of public and military opinion that could no longer support the weight of their own manufactured history. A new provisional government was formed, one that sought not to rule, but to learn. Human ships, not warships, but diplomatic envoys, scientific vessels, and cultural exchange missions began to arrive in Cathar space, not as occupiers, but as partners. They brought with them knowledge that the Cathar had lost or never known. Medicine that could cure plagues once thought unstoppable. Agricultural techniques that could turn barren worlds green. And most importantly, they brought the truth. The uncensored, unedited history of the galaxy, a story far richer and more complex than the simple narrative of conquest the Cathar had told themselves. The process was not easy. There was resistance from those who could not let go of the old ways, the old pride. But for most, the initial shock and humiliation gave way to a sense of profound liberation. They were no longer the solitary, besieged masters of a hostile universe. They were part of something larger, something ancient and magnificent. They were a single voice in a grand, galactic choir, and they were finally ready to learn their part. Kalen, now a key figure in the new government, found himself working closely with Captain Rostova and her human colleagues. He was a frequent visitor to the Copernicus, which had taken up a permanent, peaceful station in orbit around the Cathar homeworld. He would spend long periods in its vast, silent library, a repository of data globes that glowed with the stored knowledge of forgotten empires. He learned of the rise of the silicates of Jotunheim, not as a conquered vassal state, but as a civilization of philosophers who had willingly joined a galactic alliance for mutual protection. He learned of the Or, whose telepathic abilities were not a biological curiosity, but the result of a symbiotic relationship with a microorganism that permeated the very atmosphere of their planet. He learned that the Zethra, whose aggressive expansionism had always been a threat, were driven by a deep-seated racial memory of their own world's destruction by a stellar flare, a tragedy that had instilled in them a desperate, perpetual search for a safe haven. One cycle, as he and Captain Rostova were studying a particularly ancient star chart in the heart of the library, he noticed something he had never seen before. It was a faint marking, an almost invisible notation at the extreme edge of the galactic map, far beyond the borders of the known galaxy, out in the silent, starless void of intergalactic space. It was a symbol he did not recognize, a complex, spiraling sigil, and next to it, a single, cryptic phrase written in the language of one of the long-ascended elder races. "What is this?" he asked, pointing a clawed finger at the notation. Captain Rostova's calm demeanor shifted. A shadow, deeper and more profound than any he had seen before, crossed her face. For a moment she seemed not a serene guardian of knowledge, but a weary soldier standing a long and lonely watch. She looked at the symbol, and then at Kalen, her eyes holding a gravity that made the lesson with the Armada seem like a trivial matter. "That," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "is why we are here. That is the real reason for the watch. It is the reason for the great library, for the treaties, for our long and patient observation of younger races like your own." She touched a control and the star chart zoomed in, crossing the vast, empty expanse between galaxies until the faint symbol filled the screen. It was not just a sigil. It was a warning, a beacon, a marker left behind by the departed elders. Before they left, Rostova continued, her voice heavy, they encountered something in the void, something vast and ancient and hungry. Not a civilization, not an empire, something else. A form of life, if that is the right word, that operates on principles so alien, so utterly outside our understanding of biology or physics, that the elders themselves could not comprehend it. They could only observe its effects. The display shifted, showing telemetry from an ancient deep space probe. It showed a galaxy distant and faint, and then it showed that galaxy winking out, not in the fire of a supernova, not in the slow decay of entropy, but in an instant. A galaxy of 100 billion stars and all the life it might have contained simply gone, as if it had been consumed. "It is a form of cosmic erosion," Rostova said, her voice filled with a chilling awe. "A blight. It moves slowly between the galaxies through the great voids, but it moves, and it is coming. The elders could not stop it. They could only delay it. They built a series of barriers, not of matter or energy, but of manipulated spacetime, a quarantine on a scale that beggars the imagination to slow its advance. But the barriers will not hold forever." Kalen stared at the screen, at the ghost of a dead galaxy, and he finally understood. The threat from the Cathar Imperium, the squabbles of the Allied dominions, the rise and fall of empires, it was all a prelude. A childish game played in the nursery while a storm of unimaginable magnitude gathered outside the walls. The true challenge, the final test, was not against each other. It was against the silent, patient, all-consuming darkness that was slowly, inexorably making its way toward them. "This thing," Kalen stammered, "does it have a name?" "The elders called it the static on the edge of silence," Rostova replied. "Because on all their deep space sensors across all dimensions, the universe is filled with a faint background resonance, the echo of its creation. But from the direction of the blight, there is nothing. A perfect, absolute silence, the absence of everything." She turned to him, and her eyes were no longer those of a teacher, but of a fellow soldier looking at her new and utterly unprepared ally. "This is the real reason we needed you to mature, Lord Admiral. It is why we need all the younger races of this galaxy to put aside their petty conflicts and stand together. The elders are gone. The watch is now ours. Humanity cannot face this alone. No single race can. The ship everyone ignored was not here to humble an armada. It was here to recruit one." The revelation settled upon Kalen, a weight and a purpose greater than any he had ever known. His people had spent millennia seeking to prove their strength, their worthiness to rule. Now they were being offered a chance to prove their worthiness to survive. He looked out from the library's viewport at the distant, glittering swirl of his home galaxy, a fragile island of light and life in an infinite, and suddenly menacing, ocean of darkness. The future was no longer a matter of borders and treaties, of dominance and submission. It was a matter of unity or oblivion. The human, this calm, quiet being from a race they had dismissed as insignificant, had not just saved his people from their own folly. She had given them a reason to exist. She had given them a war worthy of their history, not against each other, but for everything that was against the silent, encroaching night. And in that terrifying, exhilarating moment, Kalen knew that the Cathar and all the races of their galaxy would not face it alone. The age of empires was over. The age of unity had begun.